evidence shows us that over the past 10 years, workplace injury and the claims related to that has increased by 161%. The statistics speaks for itself.
Sometimes when we talk about workplace safeties, we always think about helmet, construction sites, or even some of the physical hazards. But today, we are going to be explore a much more invisible in most of the workplaces, but is one of the biggest risks in organization. Stress, burnout, toxic communication, and unclear expectation. Most of the leaders, they always have to question themselves and ask about, is my team productive? Is the workplace work health safety compliance? But now they may need to be think deeper. Is my workplace psychological safe? Therefore, I'm so exciting, super exciting for today's conversation with my guest speaker, Uma here. Uma, welcome to WonderVoice. And WonderVoice is the way we challenge the leader. How do you think about well-being, leadership, and the culture? And today, we've got Uma here joining us in today's a conversation. The podcast is, she's deeply been working in the field of the leadership training for over 10 years. And she's very focusing in the leadership coaching training. And now she's actually currently studying the PhD in mindfulness, psychosocial well-being, and the productivity in workplace. People think about wellness is fluffy, but it actually has the scientific backup and the research to prove that it is not nice to have, it's must to have. Hello, Uma.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me here at WonderVoice. What a beautiful venue you've got, and what a great initiative. So yeah, thank you so much. And the introduction you gave about psychosocial safety in the workplace and the fact that the landscape has shifted now, I'm really, really excited to talk to you and have this conversation.
Yes, 100%. And let me ask you the first question, which is I'm also very curious about as well. When the regulation actually been announced from the government, the psychological and the psychosocial, how do you see it?
It should be a shift in leadership philosophy and paradigm. And why I'm saying this is that while the regulation has actually triggered the conversation, the research has been going on for a very long time. As a matter of fact, evidence shows us that over the past 10 years, workplace injury and the claims related to that has increased by 161%. The statistics speaks for itself. So psychosocial safety, it's now, like I said, it's not a checklist tick box like, oh, it's a HR policy, let's do this. It's about how do we design workplace in a way that protects rather than injures at a psychological level.
How are we going to create an environment, the workplace in a psychological safety space without damaging the productivity and financial stability, right? How do you see the leaders respond to these compliance?
Have a very, very, a different angle to the question now with the focus on the leaders. How are they going to respond to that? Even in my case, being an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur within organizations, I have been through the stress and the burnout. And at a point in time in the hospitality environment, I actually quit work because I was so burnt out, so exhausted that I couldn't do it anymore. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't even have the coping mechanisms for that. And that's what's happening with leaders, because leaders always are trying to put the people, the team in front of them. And they also don't have enough of coping mechanism to deal with the ever-evolving regulations. And with AI, everything is changing every single day. For me, it's all about put your oxygen mask first. I mean, you cannot pour from an empty cup. Leaders cannot exhaust themselves and, be in a burnout stage and help others. So I think the fundamental thing is to understand how this works and how to first protect themselves so that they are in a better position to help their team. At the same time, how I see leaders responding to this is there's two ways that they are responding. One is a reactive way. That is, okay, what policies should I bring in? What documentations do I need to do? What am I supposed to be looking for? And that's the constant way of how do I, comply with this new regulation. Some leaders are more proactive. They're looking at how can I redesign my workplace systems and culture? What do I need to do to improve the mental health and well-being of my people? So if you can see, there's a complete contrast, one being more about addressing the symptoms and the other being looking at what is causing this, how can we avoid this? So the latter is the better way of dealing it, to understand that it's not about just complying, but let's do something at a deeper level that's going to help shift the environment of workplace.
So I want to be asking, what is the difference between the psychological and psychosocial safety?
That's a great question. I think many people might have they think they both are the same, but actually they are fundamentally different concepts. Nevertheless, they influence each other and they are interrelated. So psychological safety is more about feeling safe within the team, to be able to speak their voice, to be able to express, to be able to trust, to feel safe at a psychological level, right? Psychosocial safety, on the other hand, is about creating a workplace environment in terms of role ambiguities, because that creates stress, avoiding conflicts, having civil workplace relationship, environmentally safe space. So it's more about risks, managing the hazards of psychological risk. So as you can see, these both are two different concepts. Nevertheless, a lack thereof psychosocial safety can lead to psychological distress or injury. That's where the relatedness is.
Most people, they actually turn it on their safety mode, protection mode, because fair enough, they need to protect their asset. They need to protect their right, protect their team, and protect their business, right? However, when you are really focusing in protection mode, then how are you going to be able to connect with others? So my questions to you is, how do you turn my protection mode into a connection mode?
Oh.
Hello, Wonder, who you are becoming. What is your next journey? Stay curious and stay open. Subscribe WonderVoice. You will get more stories, real story, more insights, and different journey coming next.
Let's just look at historically, leadership has all been about, like you said, looking into revenue generation, performance, productivity, and how do we make that work? How do we protect in order to have those outcomes, right? And at the same time, we need to understand that with psychosocial safety being a key fundamental focus at this point in workplace, it's about how do we achieve those outcomes without losing the protectiveness of your economics and your reputation and so on. So here's where I really love the concept of mindfulness, because the practice of mindfulness helps us to become conscious leaders, intentional leaders. And this is more heart-centered, human-centric connectedness we can create through that sort of a thought process, which is more about being compassionate. So we can protect what we need to protect, but still coming from a place of compassion for ourselves and others. So there's not much of rigidity, but also the complete level of agility and the ability to be adapting to the ever-changing environment. Because see, we are functioning in a VUCA environment. In this research that I do, I've been looking into various elements of workplace, what is happening. With the VUCA, is the V is volatility of the landscape, U is uncertainty, C is complexity, and A is ambiguity. This is what we're dealing with, right?
Yes.
And imagine every day dealing with the situation, with this landscape, and for leaders to be able to protect, right, their role, their organization, and yet being able to be connected comes from a heart-centered, human-centered leadership model, which can be developed through compassion, acceptance, being non-judgmental, and mindfulness is a great tool for that.
Wow, that's so powerful. You are the one who choose what actions in order to create an environment.
Yeah.
And many times I've been sharing is we are not an individual contributor. There are many individual contributors to the organization to make things happen together. However, the leader's responsibility is we have the responsibility to create an environment for us to be growing, and also the team, they can thrive and growing together. So how do you seeing the leaders actually underestimate the psychosocial risk here?
Oh, big time. Because it's always seen as a cost. I remember speaking to a five-star luxury hotel, said, hey, we could do mindfulness as an intervention, preventive intervention, because yes, you've got EAP. Oh no, we've got EAP. EAP is different. It's reactive, right? And in speaking to many, employees myself, they've said, hey, it's available, but I don't feel safe because it's still connected to the company in a way that after I have a problem, I'm going having this conversation, and there's only a couple of sessions available, right? So it's more like it's there, but it's not there. Are they getting the real outcome from that? At the same time, something like an intervention like a mindfulness and psychosocial safety training can show measurable outcome. Simply, for instance, something like a coaching has 300% ROI for the organization. Yeah, we spend the money, but then the ROI is really, really high because we're talking about human capital and optimizing human potential. That is a big capital in itself, and if we can invest rightly on them, the results are going to be very, very high. Because I think stats from 18-19 compared to 22-23, there was 30% increase in mental health claims. What does that tell us? Post-COVID, mental health claims have increased. And that is even after all the awareness, mental health is important, we need to focus, it has still escalated. And that's why I'm really excited when the talks around psychosocial safety and that it's become mandate. I think at one point when I was reading, it said that the investigations or the visitations were going to increase by 21%. I was like, that's exciting. Good news. Right? I think we need to understand that it looks like a cost, like it's just like sustainability, right? First you spend more money, but later on you reap the benefits out of it. That's how this is.
Yes, 100%. When you invest in people, you may be thinking that's an intangible, like an investment, right?
Yeah.
But down the track, that is how we're going to be creating sustainable business winnings. And I'm so happy by keep learning and seeing Australia is the first country to have this as like a regulation.
Yeah.
Then that's why I'm so happy and feeling that we are definitely in such a lovely country. So Uma, can you share some of the practical tips for the leaders they can follow?
Leaders are doing their best to do the best for their team. But as I said, operating in a VUCA environment, it becomes really, really difficult for them to manage these expectations. But if it is strategically addressed, because when we talk about psychosocial safety, it is a strategic advantage, competitive advantage that they can leverage on. And like you mentioned earlier, you said about it's invisible. Yes, physical injury actually is seen straight. You can immediately notice, okay, there's a physical injury, and the recovery is much faster when compared to psychological injury because it's not visible unless it gets compounded and then there's a sudden breakdown, and the recovery from that takes way more time. So actually the cost is very, very high, right? I like to look at the solution through a 5A framework. I always like concepts and frameworks and models because it's easy to remember and easy to implement. So the first one is the awareness. The awareness that there are psychosocial hazards in the workplace, probably extensive work hours, incivility, toxic work environment, work pressure, like you mentioned, ambiguity and all those situations, right? So being aware of that and listening to the employees. Number 2 is then assessments. We need to do psychosocial assessments to understand where the gaps are, where the problem areas are, because without that you cannot even know what are we going to solve if we do not know where the problem and the gaps are. And the next is alignment, that is aligning training and measures and all these activities that could be done to align with creating a safe work environment, and that is in accordance to the Safe Work Australia obligations, right? And the next part is action. After you align it with what needs to happen, we take action through implementing those practices. And finally, accountability. How do we measure the KPIs? Okay, this is the action plan. we measure it, and we are accountable that we achieve it. So that's the 5A framework I love to follow in order to achieve this outcome.
And thank you for sharing a lot of the insights here. I believe that there is a long ways to go that we can explore, and then putting the action plan to support leaders, CEOs, and business owner a better and better. And Uma, I know people, they may want to be connect with you. So we will put Uma's like a bio into the comment link. So please seeing the comment to connect Uma's on the LinkedIn or Instagram as well. Absolutely. Uma has a really in-depth leadership coaching training, which is you may want to be find out a little bit more. And I will be running a joint leadership retreat with Uma in the upcoming calendar month. So please stay tuned with us. And I will see you all next time to explore another wellness. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.